Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Tuesday, November 26th. It's also a great pleasure to kind of resume a conversation we've been doing periodically over the last 4 or 5 years around real estate. Real estate's a big part of our local economy here, and certainly during when the pandemic arrived, we saw the real estate market explode and go in all kinds of crazy directions, I guess, and kind of kept on doing that. But we're really pleased to be joined in the studio today by Greg Cutler, who is a realtor with Four Seasons Sotheby's International Realty. He works in their Manchester office. Jenifer Hoffman is the principal broker and owner of Hoffman Real Estate based in North Bennington. And TG Glazer is a realtor with Winhall Real Estate. Welcome to the show,
Thank
TG.
you. Thank you.
Great to have you with us. So we've got all parts of the Northshire, Southshire, and Midshire covered, I guess, right? I'm not sure we have. That would be. We could have 3 shires.
That's right.
The High Shire and the Low Shire.
Right. We'll figure it out one of these days. But anyway, the 3 of them are here to kind of bring us up to speed and what are some of the latest trends in the real estate market. Jen, I guess I'd like to start with you. What are you seeing in the real estate market these days? Are properties still flying off the shelves as fast as they get put on, and prices on a steady incline, or have things kind of settled down a bit?
I think you're going to get different answers depending on who you ask. So I will speak specifically for the Southshire. The market towns that I serve are from Pownell up to, say, Arlington, Sunderland, Sandgate, being on the northern end of my kind of territory, if you will. And we're seeing definitely a higher days on market average. Most properties are now taking, anywhere from, say, 7 days to 30 days, maybe 45 days to go under contract. So that is certainly a lot longer time on the market compared to where we were a year or 2 ago, where you'd have 10 offers within the first few days. We're still getting a lot of showings, which is to me a really good sign. We still have a lot of buyers out there looking. I just find that between the home prices increasing the way that they have so much over the last few years, and that there's still really fewer opportunities out there. A lot of buyers are being pickier. They're not necessarily jumping on the first thing that they see. A lot of these buyers have been wanting to buy for the last few years, and sadly their buying power has decreased as the interest rates have risen, prices have risen, and so their expectation of what they could have gotten a year or 2 ago is now very different from what they can afford to buy today. And so it's about really recalibrating their expectations about what they can get for their money. And so those buyers are being a little bit pickier, choosier, and waiting for the right one to come along. I think the overall pricing has really leveled off. We've seen some very aspirational prices hitting the market over the last, say 3 to 6 months. And we've also seen a lot of price reductions as a result of that. So it's great to shoot for the moon if you have the luxury of time, but if you really need to sell quickly, you're going to need to be pricing at or below market value to get it sold quickly.
And Greg, is that similar to what you're seeing in the Northshire area?
It is. It's interesting though. There was some might consider it an anomaly, but a 2-bedroom, 2-bath on 0.3 acres in downtown Manchester went on, and within 6 days it was under contract. But the real story here is 44 showings, 15 offers, and I think it blasted well past the ask of $395. So the market is strong. There are still people with money on the sidelines. There's still a lot of cash out there. People are waiting for the right opportunity. And I think Jen's right. If you're marketing your property at market value or a little below, you're going to probably wind up doing very well. And if it's in great shape, ready to go, you're not going to languish on the market. And we've seen a lot of reductions. The properties that are on the market were priced too high to begin with, or as you say, aspirational. I love that. That's good. And we want to help our clients do the best they possibly can. And sometimes, and in this market, in doing so, we would say go in at or just below the value. based on the comps in the market. But, and Jen's right, I had pulled up some stats earlier. Average days on the market in Manchester are 27. The average list price in Manchester is 804,000. Average sale price $774,000 in this market, and there are 46 total listings right now. So that may be off a day or two, but in terms of actual numbers. But it's a strong market, still low inventory, a little bit of a creep. We're not seeing the interest rates affecting our area as much, but I would say that if you're thinking of selling, not a bad time.
Well, I want to chime in about that because one of my agents wrote one of those offers on
I
that
wrote one of
particular.
those
Yeah, a
offers,
lot of people did. Yeah, but if the average sale price, list price in Manchester is over $800,000, that's why a listing at $395,000 sold like that with that much interest.
Exactly.
So,
I mean,
so
I
if you're
think
under that average,
in that bracket,
right.
say 3 to 6, yeah, you're gonna do very well.
Absolutely.
Because there are people ready to, and presumably they've got some money to renovate and do what they want to those properties.
Although I will say, I think that the past couple of months has definitely been kind of a little bit of an anomaly on that. Between it being stick season and the election, I think people definitely kind of pulled back a little bit.
There was a period of calm.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
Or no activity. Really.
Yeah. I mean,
October was slow.
Yeah, there's a listing 2 miles from Stratton Mountain, a 2-bedroom log cabin for $275. That I figured there's going to be investors lined up around the block for that one, and it's still sitting. Wow. So there'll need to be an adjustment made there. So I think now that we're past the election, I think now that we're getting into ski season and people will be up looking at stuff a little bit more, things will come back a little bit from what has been the last few months. But I do think things have kind of leveled out a little bit. Places that are priced properly are going to still sell pretty quickly. But yeah, you have to be at that right at where it should be, or just a little bit below to create some of that excitement. And that's any market. Whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, if you're overpriced, it's just not going to sell.
I remember back in 2020, 2021, it seemed like a lot of properties were selling just sight unseen. You'd make a video of the building, and people would watch that, and they would make a decision based on that. Is that still going on, or are people at the point now where they're say, I want to put my eyeballs on the property and walk through it at least before I make a decision?
I think that has definitely slowed down. I haven't seen that for a couple of years now, maybe 1 or 2. But because the inventory has been coming up a little bit, buyers feel that they have a little bit more time, or something else will come on the market, and it's not just, oh my gosh, this is the perfect place, this is the only one, this is my only opportunity, and I've got to get it right this second. So I think because things have been leveling out and the inventory has been coming up a little bit, and the prices are not skyrocketing and continuing to go up at that very steep level, that people feel that they have a little bit more opportunity to kind of sit back and say, okay, is this the right place for me, or do I have time to go take a look at it in person?
Interesting. So are there any types of properties that are selling better than others? I mean, are you seeing things like at the upper end of the market still performing strongly, but in the mid-range not so much, or vice versa? I think I recall the last time we were all talking about this, it was that mid-range, $500,000 to $1 million, let's say, was the hot part of the market. Is that still the case? What's going on?
So I will say down for the Southshire area, it was probably right now between 200,000 and 400,000 is very hot and fast. If something is under $200,000, chances are it needs a ton of work. I would say really $200,000 is now a base entry price point for a move-in ready house. And that's still for a very small residence, maybe a 1,200 square foot single family house. So if you have a house between $200,000 and $400,000, whether it's big or small, has a lot of land, or just a little tiny, small yard in town, it's probably going to sell on the very quick end of things if it is move-in ready. Contractors are very busy still, and so if a house needs a ton of work, I think that those properties are still really lagging. I had one very close to the studio that had a lot of interest right away, but it needed a ton of work. The seller was not in a position to do that work up front. If it had just had a paint job on the outside, that would have made a world of difference, because it's that curb appeal and that initial photograph, that drive-by. So if you have a house that is in need of that facelift on the outside, I do strongly encourage people to try to get that done. That's one really great way to not only make your property be more attractive to people right out of the gate. You're going to get more people coming in, but it's also going to be able to be easier to finance. Our housing stock is very old here, so if your house was built before 1978, the bank is going to assume that it's lead-based paint, depending on the type of financing you're doing, which is more of an issue in my market area. The first-time home buyers who are doing the low down payment loans, they cannot have a house with chipping and peeling paint. So if you can front-end that work, it's going to be a lot easier for us to find you the right buyer and get you a top price for that house.
Yeah. I think the $1 million plus market is a little tough, and especially in the $4 to $8 million market too. But there have been some $1 million to $2.5 that are moving a little bit. Actually, it's interesting too because I had some do-it-yourselfers. Two properties come to mind, one in Mount Tabor and a farmhouse needed a little bit of work, and I actually drove by to see how that was going with them, and they just did an incredible job on their place, and this was the buyer did it. Didn't have to wait around for somebody to be able to be available. And then the other one was just last week in Dorset, and small farmhouse, needs a lot of work, and they literally closed and started in that day. So doing do-it-yourself work, not all the mechanical so much as just a lot of the stuff that needed the paint and things like that inside. And so there are people out there who are willing to take on those properties and do the work themselves and not wait for those contractors. But most of the contractors I know are still slammed. It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
This has been a great market not only for buyers and sellers, but obviously for all the trades in the area. And it's interesting also to see in Manchester, two projects going on right downtown. One at the Hampton. If it ends in TON, and the Hampton, and that was going to be a brew pub. I think it still is.
Yes, it is.
And then the pizza, or Greek restaurant apparently going in where Sam's was.
Right.
So there's a lot of activity in Manchester too, where commercial was sort of flailing back during COVID or pre-COVID, and now there's not a lot of space.
And in Bennington, I'll say that the Marshalls just opened up. Hoffman Car Wash opened up yesterday. No relation.
And I needed
Free car wash.
Free car wash.
I needed it was like
Me too.
rats.
I know.
didn't
Yeah.
make it.
I think they're actually doing the free car washes through the 1st, but don't quote me on that. But so there is a lot of great commercial activity happening down in Bennington, which is really exciting because that was depressed for a while. During COVID, it was really difficult to get projects up and off the ground. Things were taking a long time to get permits and to get the right workers in to get jobs completed. So having that Bennington Square Plaza now being repaved, it's fully packed. You've got Harbor Freight, Marshalls, Ocean State Job Lot, all there in the same plaza as Staples. It's really exciting to see people coming back to shopping in the brick and mortar again.
But I will say on that commercial front, it's very interesting in the Manchester market. You do have some new commercial buildings that are going up, these restaurants and bars and things like that, but there's a bunch of existing ones that are for sale that have been for sale for a long time and are just not able to sell. I think that there is an oversaturation in the commercial market for places that are for sale. So it's an interesting
restaurants
kind
in
of
particular
dynamic.
too.
Yeah.
So you've got 2 restaurants being built,
Right.
and you've
then
got
a bunch that are
you've
for
got
sale.
4 or 5 that are for sale. 6 that just sprung to mind.
Wow.
Some that came on and off the market that are off the market now.
Yeah.
And I'm with the Vermont Sales Group, and we have a commercial entity within it, and we've really are focusing on selling the real estate for those businesses now, not the businesses themselves. Because in that sector, I think people don't want to. I don't know whether it's the workforce threat of not getting a workforce or having to deal with workforce issues in restaurants. I'm not sure what it is, or whether there's just got to be a whole new group of chef owners who want to move to the area. I
think
know.
that's a big part of it. I do think that the workforce is a huge part of that. I know I have a commercial listing for a bar restaurant, and one of the reasons that they're selling is because it's so difficult to operate because they can't keep people. They're not getting servers and chefs and things like that. So they're closing when they can't get people, and so it's that consistency that they can't keep up. So it makes it a lot more difficult to run and operate a business like that if you don't have that workforce housing.
Well, natural segue then into a question I did want to throw in. There's been a lot of talk about the need for workforce / affordable housing in our area here. A couple of proposals floated, a couple have even got off the ground, it seems like. But clearly there's a lot less housing for that workforce missing middle group than probably would be desirable in a perfect world. I guess I just wondered if, in fact, we're somehow able to see the construction of a couple of hundred, I suppose is what we'd really be talking about if we wanted to, satisfy that demand. What is the impact of that would have on the real estate market? Would the fact that there would be that much more new inventory kind of be a downward sort of pressure on housing prices?
On single family housing
or
prices?
wouldn't it make any difference?
Well, in Manchester, they created a housing task force, and they're working on addressing the issue from every angle. What's interesting to me is that I think of it as an employee housing problem, not necessarily a widespread housing problem. And a lot of the employers are taking it on themselves. So J.K. Adams, I'm sorry, R.K. Miles. Now another problem here is there are too many initials and last names associated with businesses.
Hey, I'm one of those, so
I know.
Careful, Greg.
I know, careful. And I love
R.K.
them all.
Miles, yeah.
I love them all, but so R.K. Miles is addressing the issue and building some units for their people. Stratton, of course, is taken on the former
Motels.
Rest, I think, motel.
they bought I think 3 different motels.
And 3 different motels.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people come to me when I had motels for sale looking at it for employee housing. So it's being addressed in that fashion. There's, I know of a couple of proposals that are not as big as the one that was in the paper about the 430 units that was, at that time, I think it was just being floated as an idea. And now I know that there's some people looking at putting in fewer units, possibly in the same location, and trying to price, say, between $175,000 and $200,000 each, depending on how it pencils out. Micro communities are huge in New Hampshire, Maine, down in Atlanta. They're doing it. I have a sense that that's going to be something that may be proposed for this area. So, and also in terms of somebody, when I used to do rentals, people would call in. If I didn't have any inventory, and often I was working with people who were okay with paying a real estate agent a commission on their rental. A lot of people, that can be prohibitive for the landlord and drive prices up for the renter. So I would say go onto the forums and say you're in search of X. I never heard from those people again. My assumption is they're finding housing through those channels where people have some kind of apartment adjacent or something in their home, or an accessory dwelling unit, which we've also been allowing more of that. So and in the past couple of months, the whole housing cry has seemed to dim down here where we are, but it could be just because we're addressing it from every angle. I'm not sure.
Down in Bennington, there's several projects that are underway. These would be rentals, not homes for sale or condos for sale, but as rentals, we have about 1,000 units short in the Bennington area. So there's a high demand for housing still, and it's really exciting to see developers coming in. the middle school project. I mean, to me, it's the middle school. Most people call it Ben High, but I went to middle school there, so that's I think of it as Mount Anthony Middle School. But that's a really huge undertaking, you know, in the multi-millions. It's a public-private partnership with like 10 different funding sources. So it is complex to renovate really old structures like that. They're also going to be preserving the old gymnasium to have that as a community resource, that the YMCA will be running that facility. The senior center will be moving in there, so the Meals on Wheels program will go in the old cafeteria, and then the rest of the old building, the offices and the classrooms, will be renovated into apartments. And it will be a mix of low income and affordable, you know, market rent housing. Really excited about up on East Main Street, the old Bradford mill. It was a textile mill, and that's right across from Johnny Suds. So very convenient to have the laundromat right across the street. They're going to be putting about $5 million into renovating that old industrial building into 30 new rental units. But honestly, the forums are both a huge source of information, but it's also a lot of negativity. And it's hard for me to go on there and see these really positive things being shared and all the naysayers that are commenting.
Oh yeah, you get it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, you have to have a really thick
And it-
skin
yeah,
to participate online.
But in terms of people looking, I would say, you know, that's not a bad place to
Absolutely.
go in, because if it's not being in the real estate market through an agent,
Correct.
You
You can have
likely
good luck
find-
that way.
Yeah, a lot have. It's in this area, a lot have.
But again, I will say, have a thick skin. You know, I posted my mom's apartment for rent, and people really came at me
Oh well, then
for how
right.
expensive
Oh,
it
no,
was.
No, no,
You know,
that's
and so
true. Well, it's better once you make that connection. Not necessarily because you're advertising a
Right.
place. It's better if somebody says, I'm
Asking
in
for
search of,
something.
yeah, and then they get in touch privately. Yeah.
But you need to have
I
both
think
pieces of the
anybody
puzzle.
putting a rental out there needs to understand, based on the price, you can get a lot of backlash. It's
Absolutely.
not pretty. Yeah,
Correct.
I've seen that.
And but that to me is a public service announcement, right? To say, if someone is posting something that is for rent and you have nothing nice to say, just please keep scrolling,
Right.
because you are
Right.
preventing someone who does need housing from finding
And
it.
they don't know what the final outcome negotiation on that
Absolutely.
deal is. It may not be that high.
Correct.
The other thing that's interesting about building is with the new rules around Act 250, I think towns that have, I'm going to do it in a general sense, but ordinances and water and sewer may not be subject to Act 250. And I think I just read about a project in Rutland that is taking advantage of that, and they're going to renovate a building that otherwise would have been subject to a lengthy Act 250 process. So that's a really big deal, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And I think, getting back to your original question about whether additional workforce housing would affect the price of homes in the area, I don't think that would affect things in either direction necessarily. I do think that because of the lack of workforce housing that we have, it does put a strain on the local businesses to be able to keep up and have people working, so that when we do have, especially in our resort areas, when you've got people coming and they want to go to a restaurant and the restaurant's closed because they don't have the employees to do anything, it says to those people, oh, is this a great place for us to be, or do we want to be here? So I think just having that additional workforce housing will boost the local infrastructure and economy, so it won't necessarily have a negative or positive net effect on real estate prices per se.
I agree. There's a saying, a rising tide lifts all ships. And I totally agree with you. I think that when we have more housing, it can support more people to be a part of our economy, and that will boost everything overall.
So before I move on to the next question about short-term rentals, I'm going to put in a brief plug here, since Jenifer, you gave me the opening for that. The Ben High project there, where I went for 10th grade. It was then Mount Anthony Union High School at that point, but it was the last year the building was open for high school, so little age gap in there, I guess. But we're going to be doing a program with Zach Hale.
Awesome.
In a couple of weeks, we're going to do a walkthrough of the building and kind of have them talk about what's going to be going on, and we'll have the cameras rolling and everything. So it'll be fun to kind of look inside there. The last time I was in that building was in 1967, I think. So it's probably changed a little bit. Got to change some more, but. Anyway, well, we'll see. But I wondered, kind of to follow up on all of that, what about, I mean, the other big issue that seems to be kicking around a lot is the whole short-term rental question. A lot of municipalities around our area have been putting in place some regulations and restrictions or the rules of the road and how does that all interface with everything else? I mean, it seems like that's been an area that's just exploded in popularity, Airbnbs or whatever. I mean, what are you seeing in that market? Is that continuing to grow a lot, like it seemed like it was doing a couple of years ago, or is that kind of stabilized a little bit?
I think that there's kind of a little bit of both. So you have, because we had so many investors, and we still do have investors who are coming and buying properties to be Airbnb type properties. There's a little bit of a saturation of that. So the prices maybe that they were getting previously aren't as high now because there are so many options. And I do think that there's that balance of some of the regulation that some of the towns are trying to impose for short-term rentals, juxtaposed with private property rights. So you have to kind of balance those two things. Somebody's buying a property, and then you're going to tell them what they can and can't do with that property. But there's also the need for long-term housing for, especially, we're talking about rentals and things like that, which those Airbnbs are taking away from. So there is a little bit of a delicate balance there. And I think some of the regulations and registries that are being proposed, there are some definite positive things. I mean, the registries, I think, are really important because you are having, people who buy these places, but they're not here. So things would go wrong and nobody would know who to talk to or anything like that. So having some accountability is certainly important for those. And there's not really a lot of data about what the impact is of those short-term rentals taking away from long-term rentals and how that's affecting the economy.
Is that what the rest of you are saying as well? Or?
Well, in Manchester too, from a legislative standpoint, I think we're waiting to find out what the state is going to mandate, if anything at all. And looking at revenue generation from the state's point of view, I'd be surprised if they came down on it as a ban, a total ban in any way, shape, or form, because I think they're bringing in an enormous amount of revenue from short-term rentals. But the other issue being the registration is fine. The enforcement of anything past a registration, including trying to get Airbnb owners to pay that fee annually. So they might come in and pay it once, but then you've got to have somebody literally, and you have to have a whole administrative wing to take care of any post-registration / annual fee and inspection, all those things. I'm very wary of setting that up. I think that it's typical for municipalities to create some law and then have no way to enforce it. So I think you're right about the market. I think it's sort of slowed down post-COVID a little bit since then. But there are places that have a core group of, I actually have one that's attached to our house. So, which is something that may become, I can envision the state saying, and or the municipality saying, if you have a home, it's part of your home, you can do it. If you have an accessory dwelling unit, that's fine, but you can't buy a property, for example, to turn it into a full-time short-term rental. And again, that would come down to enforcement. So who's out there driving around to see whether or not that's actually happening? But it may be the most fair way. The other issue is, and we talked at the Vermont Sales Group when we meet, I was meeting just before I got here, and we were talking about this a little bit. Even if a property, a single family unit was made available in our market, it most likely, based on those numbers I gave earlier, are not going to satisfy the needs of the workforce housing individuals in this market. So the idea that, well, if we reduce, the number of short-term rentals, will increase the number either long-term rentals, and you can't force people into renting out their place, number one. And then it becomes, okay, it goes on the open market. Is that property actually going to be available to those people that need it the most? So I think waiting to see how it shakes out. There's probably going to be a national wave on how this is dealt with. People are going to see what works and whatnot. There's some great resources, by the way, if you want to look that up, about what's being done nationally with short-term rentals.
Also, I'll say down in Shaftesbury, which is the town that I live in, they have regulated short-term rentals in the municipality. They've now said that, and this has actually passed a couple of years ago, it actually happened under the radar. A lot of people didn't even know that it had happened, but you have to be a primary occupant in order to be able to have a short-term rental, on your property.
Right.
So if somebody wants to purchase a property in Shaftesbury, not live there, and just exclusively rent it out, even if they're going to be buying it as a vacation home and rent it out some of the time, that's not allowed in
Right.
Shaftesbury.
Right.
They have to live on site. And so oftentimes they don't even realize that that's an issue until a realtor gets involved. And then points it out to them, hey, the zoning in this town does not allow this use. So it's both a problem for selling and for buying in terms of how we are marketing those properties. Also, I want to point out that I think a major slowdown in the investor market that's happening here in Vermont is because of the property transfer tax. The state of Vermont passed a substantial increase in the property transfer tax for second home buyers this past summer. It then went from 1.45% to 3.62%. So that's a huge increase, and that's on the total purchase price. So if you're buying a house for, say, $1 million and you plan to use it just as a second home or as a rental, that's going to be a $36,000 tax. That's a big chunk of change that is immediately out the door. You're never going to see a return on that investment. That's just now how Vermont is collecting tax. And it's still on the low 1.45% end if it's a primary residence. So those folks who are buying it to live in full time for themselves have seen a decrease. And I don't want to get into all the boring math about that, but just know that there's a savings happening if you're looking to buy a home to live there full time. So they're incentivizing primary home buyers and really disincentivizing the vacation home buyer.
And the proceeds of those taxes for the higher taxes is supposed to go into housing, to generate housing. There's a loophole that says if you rent your property, so you buy a property second homeowner, you may be able to enjoy a lower tax rate if you rent for 30 days. And it is happening. I was just talking to an attorney about it and how that's working out. So
But again, we have an enforcement issue.
There's also the
and it's
LLC
the same
loophole.
enforcement issue in Shaftesbury. I mean, you can
Right.
say it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there's somebody able to go around and to be checking on every property that was sold and saying, you're not supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
And it's that part's very difficult. So but again, I think it'll shake out long term. But I'm always going to say if the state is pulling down huge revenues from these short-term rentals, I don't know that that's in their best interest to do something like turn the tap off.
Specifically as far as say Shaftesbury or any other town that is choosing to regulate short-term rentals, it takes one neighbor, one person to send a notice to the zoning administrator and flag
Jenna's
you. I'm just not going to
Take
happen.
note, Shaftesbury.
Yeah, not going to happen from me. But
No,
I'm
I'm
saying, like,
kidding.
if you find that you have a short-term rental happening next door to you and it's
Generally
disturbing
that
your
is the enforcement.
Correct.
Neighborhood
that's
enforcement.
how
Absolutely, the neighborhood watch. So just
Right.
as a PSA, to say to people, you can think that you're going to get away with it because there's not someone appointed on a town level to enforce these things, but it is your neighbors who will be enforcing these rules because they want their quiet enjoyment of their property as well.
Don't have too many parties going on past midnight with a lot of loud music.
Exactly.
Be a
Yeah.
good idea.
And that actually has been the big issue that's triggered a lot of looking into noise ordinances relating to short-term rentals has been the way that people will find out that something's being done
Yeah.
Right.
outside of the norms or ordinance.
And then it also hasn't had a fire safety inspection most of the time, right? So you also have the fire marshal who is supposed to come in anytime you have a property that's being used as a rental. It needs to then meet, Vermont's fire safety code in terms of handrails and smoke alarms and egress windows and all of these requirements. And so you can get into a world of trouble if you are illegally renting your home.
That's right.
Right.
And it goes back to the same thing, enforcement. I mean, the fire safety marshals, they don't have enough people to enforce things or to do all of those. So
It's on a complaint basis.
yeah, exactly.
Pretty much. Just one more point I wanted to ask you both about. The last time when we had one of these conversations, interest rates were, I guess, I can't remember, I think it was about to kind of level off a little bit. And I guess the Federal Reserve rate has come down a little bit since a year or so ago. Where are interest rates now for someone who's looking to get a mortgage? Are they still kind of trickling down a little bit, or are they kind of sat at the same place for a while, or is it your feeling that interest rates may continue to drop, though maybe you might want to wait 6 months or something like that, and you might get a lower rate? Is any sense around where they're all going?
They've definitely come down, and the Fed has indicated that they're going to continue to reduce rates through the year. Those Fed drops do take some time to hit the mortgage market, but I do think that over the course of the next year, and NAR's chief economist Lawrence Yun has also said, that he believes that the interest rates will continue to drop through the year. And we're still waiting to see how that will shake out and how will affect things. We still do, at least in my market, we still have a lot of cash buyers, so those interest rates really don't make a difference to those people. I think in your market where people are struggling and putting down having mortgages with looking for those down payments and everything else, it would be a little bit more of an issue. But I know up in my market there's a lot less of that. So
rates are hovering right around 6.5% right now. Of course, the rates change daily at every financial institution, so don't quote me for today. But
depending upon when you're watching
depending on when you're watching this, it'll probably take a week before it's even posted. So, but in a post-election world, at least we now know what the future holds for the next 4 years going forward with the Trump presidency. The stock market obviously quickly rebounded after the election, after he won handedly. So the realtor party is the purple party. We do not take an opinion on a national level with our presidential election. We do not support one candidate over the other. However, having the past 4 years with President Biden, and now we can look ahead to what's going to happen with President Trump, we can see that there's probably going to be some regulatory changes that are going to be happening both in our industry as well as throughout, with education, and lots of other departments are going to have a major shakeup. So it's going to have an interesting effect on the overall economy. And I think that the rates, as Lawrence Yun has said, we're going to start to see them normalizing between 5 and 6% at some point next year, that will be the real new normal. No one should be holding their breath for a 3 or a 4% mortgage. That's just not going to happen again in any kind of near future. And the saying goes, you marry the house and you date the rate. So when you find the right property, you make that purchase happen. If it's within your range of affordability, as the rates will drop, you can always choose to refinance. But prices are probably not going to be dropping overall in terms of housing. We've really leveled off. And when the rates start to drop, prices will actually start to increase again. So the best time to buy was yesterday. And just understanding that just like most things in the world, prices are not rolling back. They're always going to be going up. So get into housing while you can. That is the way to wealth building in this country, is through real estate. Home ownership is the way up for most folks to build equity for themselves, as well as to have something to pass on to their children. So get into home ownership as soon as you can.
And I think, to Jen's point, things will continue to increase. I think that a lot of people had expected a bubble to burst. I don't think we're going to have that. I think what's happened is we've gotten to a point now where, okay, this is where prices will continue to rise gradually from, and unless there's some major thing that happens that we cannot foresee, such as a global pandemic, they will continue to rise at a normalized rate from here, and we'll have a little bit more of a balanced market.
I've dealt with a few deals, probably 3 or 4 recently that were financed, and one of the things that is interesting is we're in a really good period of dealing with lenders right now. It's fast. I would say if you've got all your ducks in a row and you're working with a good lender, things go quickly. You can close within 30 days. Lenders are very attentive to these buyers, and there was a time when everybody was so busy, and it could be 60 days out or something like that, 90 days. Those days are primarily gone. I'm not hearing from those buyers, and this is say the $350,000 to $700,000 range. A lot of complaining. They're not going, well, by golly, my rate was horrible, blah, 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 blah. How could they do this to me? Not hearing anything like that. And by and large, they're having a really good experience with the lenders in this area I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, and I'll give a plug for local lenders. I won't name any names in
Yeah, I'm
particular, but I will say
lenders.
local lenders
Yeah.
will help. Some have a policy that they will do a one-time modification. If your rate drops after you close,
Right.
they want you to retain your business with them. They don't want you to be shopping to refinance with some other institution. And so there are local lenders out there in our marketplace who will do that. And that's amazing, because you will not find a big national bank who will give you a free modification to a lower rate.
It's also important to have a local lender because of the other things that go into
Yes.
the lending process. For instance, appraisers. So the local lenders are using local appraisers who know the market, and whereas some of the big national brands, you're getting people from out of the area, they don't know what's going on here, and so having those local lenders, if you're financing, is really important.
Few and far between dealing with national lenders have I ever had not had a problem. And with hyper-local and really good institutions in our area, not a problem, because they understand so much about what you said.
They do understand, and I had a meeting with one recently who they're even doing a new program to them where if somebody buys a property with cash, let's say you have someone who has the cash in the bank, they don't want to use up their entire nest egg and pour it all into their house, but if they have the ability to do that, they can close, and then the very next day they can go in and apply for the mortgage. They don't have this 6-month waiting period like they used to before you could apply for that mortgage. So if you have a buyer who has the cash, but then they can go in and get a mortgage for it, basically to pay themselves back. It's considered a cash out refinance. That's an amazing option, so that you're not now house poor. You can put the money back in the bank.
Yeah,
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
that's really good.
That's where we like our money.
Yeah, right. Better that than going out the door, I guess. But anyway, wow. So one last thing. Vermont for quite a long time has had this very attractive image and quality about it. Any concerns that might be, not the case going down the road, or do we all feel that Vermont still has that cachet about being a kind of a nice place to live and good quality of life and all of that? No storm clouds on that horizon, I assume.
I think that people still want to be here and see the benefits of being here and all of the natural beauty and everything else that the area has to offer. So recreation and arts and restaurants and shopping and things like that, and clean, fresh air. So.
All right.
I'll add to that and just say that as much of an eternal optimist as I am, I think that we are running the risk of becoming a very gentrified state. I think that the haves and the have-nots are getting further pulled apart in our state because of what has happened in the real estate market. That deeply concerns me. I'm a deeply rooted, 4th-generation Vermonter. So I want to be able to see people who have raised their families here to be able to live here until they, retire and die. And I want to make Vermont a place where everyone can stay if this is where they choose to be. So I think that we are all here fighting for the same thing, so that we have good, clean, fresh air, but places to eat, houses for everyone who wants to live here. So we're here fighting that good fight.
I think Phil Scott put his finger on the pulse of what ails Vermont after the election, and during that period where the vetoes were overturned, and he, without going into too much detail, I think touched on the fact that Act 250 needs to be reformed for development to be able to occur here. The lack of trades now, that we have so many busy tradespeople, and we don't have people to build. If you can propose a 430 unit housing development, but getting somebody to actually build that right now is wildly difficult. I think there's a lot of interesting migration to Vermont, and I think we're uniquely positioned for climate migration, for women's health migration. There's a lot of people looking at Vermont for a lot of different reasons, and I think if we can somehow get out of our own way a little bit, we'll be positioned well to handle that influx. And a lot of people don't want that to happen. They don't want what's so great about Vermont to be ruined. But I think there's a middle ground. I think Phil Scott is right when he talked about that, and you can look it up online. But I think we may be poised for some rapid growth here.
And we as realtors, we're always working with the legislature, looking at various options on how we can continue to grow in a responsible manner. Looking at those Act 250 regulations, and how we can make adjustments and fight for affordable housing and bringing people in, but in a responsible way. So we're always on top of that.
Property taxes, the way that we are funding our schools, all of these are very hot button issues. I sit on the Vermont Association of Realtors Government Affairs Committee. We meet on a weekly basis. So we are really, pulling out all the stops, trying to figure out what is the way forward that is going to make Vermont sustainable and continue to be that desirable place for people to live.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you all for making the time to come down and go over these with us. I want to thank again Greg Cutler from Four Seasons Sotheby's, Jenifer Hoffman from Hoffman Real Estate, and TG Glazer, realtor with Winhall Realty. Thank you all for making the time for this conversation. And they're always interesting. I was going back looking at a couple of the other ones we did in the past, and I thought, wow, we really nailed it on that. Or you guys did.
Thank you,
sat
Andrew.
around and listened.
Thank you, Andrew.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And thanks to all of you who've been with us today, and hope you found the program interesting, particularly if you're thinking of buying or selling a house. And, well, we'll see you again the next time. Take care.